yeah. Oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hello, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, 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 hey. I'd just like to welcome everybody to the unceded territory of the Stalo people virtually. Thank you.
Thanks, Francis. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Truth and Reconciliation, a Day of Reflection webinar on this very first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. It's so nice to see so many people, and it's so nice to see the ones who have the cameras on. I can see that they're wearing orange, so that's also really great. My name is Stephen Reichert, and I'm the principal at Reichert & Associates, and I'm joining the meeting today from the unceded and traditional territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I think a lot of people here we do know, but there are some who we don't know, and so just for their kind of knowledge, we are an evaluation firm based in Vancouver. We work across the province supporting both government and communities, and some of our work includes provincial maternity, health, mental health, and long-term care initiatives, as well as primary care. We also recently were working and honored to work on the evaluation of the provincial overdose emergency response. Our team is really proud to support the work of Gracie Kelly. We've been working with her for a while right now, as she does her work with the Chilliwack Division of Family Practice. As a research firm, we know that it's so important that we approach the things that we do in a way that recognizes all of the inequities, the structural inequities that exist. Gracie has taught our team so much as we strive to do things better and in a good way in all of our work. Today, Gracie will be joined by Dr. Francis Horne, who has also offered to share his knowledge and his experience on this first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. I just have a couple of housekeeping things before things start, and we turn everything over to Gracie and Francis. Your mics will be muted throughout the presentation, but there will be a time for questions later on. So if you have a question, please just hold on to it, and there'll be a chance for you to ask it later in the webinar. We do have, which I think is really great, we had almost 450 people register for this webinar. So, but we will make some time for questions. Gracie has also asked that the webinar be recorded. So we'll be recording the webinar and sharing that recording through a link on our website. If you're not able to find it, Lisa, who will be facilitating this from our team, we'll be able to respond to emails and place the link out for you. I just want to take a quick opportunity to thank both Gracie and Francis for allowing us to support them in this work. I also want to thank the Chilliwack Division of Family Practice and Fraser Health for their support. And then our team for putting this together. It's more than work for us. I also, again, really want to thank everyone here for taking part and showing up today. I know some of you have the day off from work and some of you are doing this because you really know that this is important to be part of. I'll now turn it over to Gracie and Francis.
Awesome. Eastwell, good day. Welcome, my dear ones. The work is about to begin. I am employed as an Indigenous Relations Manager at the Chilliwack Division of Family Practice. I made a tentative plan to discuss the TRC around September, and it just so happened the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation came to be. I am a firm believer that when we speak from the heart, we can do no wrong. I hold up my hands to the division and Fraser Health and my Kelly and Diablo families who have given me the strength to do the much needed work. I also hold up my hands in gratefulness to Reichard and Associates and Francis for assisting in our presentation today. Let us begin our journey. TRC, a day of reflection. We are honored to provide health and wellness services within the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Chilliwack, the Palau, the Tate, and the Xaxlip Indigenous peoples. I would like the participants to acknowledge where they're calling in from today in the chat. I look forward to reading later where everybody is from. And I would also like to acknowledge all the Indigenous that are here on the webinar as well. So thank you for being here. After you've shared your traditional territory that you are connected with, I ask, what kind of ancestor would you like to be remembered as? Here's some intro of who we are. Francis, you're welcome to introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Francis Horne. My ancestral name is Khut Whee Mul Uhk. I come in peace. My ancestral roots are from Lummi. My father was from Lummi and my mother was from Sao. And I am speaking today from Chackton Reserve.
Throughout the presentation, I'll be sharing some Halkamalan language words that are true to their purpose. And these words that were offered as what our ancestors have used. I am Soowahlie, Xaxlip, Fountain First Nations. I am also proud to be Chilliwack and Stalo. We are people of the river. I've been blessed with cultural teachings and traditions in my family and community to offer support and awareness and to build up who we are as Indigenous. To honor reconciliation is to answer these questions shared by Ojibwe Honorable Justice Murray Sinclair. Where do I come from? Where am I going? Why am I here? And last but certainly not least, who am I? Today we honor the lost children and survivors of residential schools, their families and communities. Public commemoration of the tragic and painful history and ongoing impacts of residential schools is a vital component of the reconciliation process. The TRC has a connection to the survivors who have shared their stories from the Common Experience payments a few years ago. The survivors have created some recommendations, and here we are today, 6 years later. Are we further ahead? Have we accomplished what was recommended? Today, I will share how the integration how integrating the 7 health calls to actions within our primary care network, and also some Indigenous perspectives of what the TRC means to myself and Francis. But first, let's acknowledge Phyllis Webstad. We hold up our hands today to acknowledge the story of Phyllis Webstad. Yaku Kosai. Thank you, everyone, for taking on the opportunity to wear the orange shirts, have access and share the pins and the posters. May 27th, 2021 is a quote from Chief Roseanne Casimir of Temexw Kamloops. This is heavy truth. The unmarked graves at Kamloops Residential School. We will continue to raise awareness of the very tragic legacy of the residential school era and to honor thousands of survivors who are on their spirit journey on their way home. There are close to 6,000 who are making that journey. I would also like to recognize Every Child Matters poster and t-shirt designs by Bonnie Graham. I'm also to share my story as well. I am one of 6 Kelly girls. My parents, George and Marjorie Kelly, attended residential school. My mom is the 2nd generation who has attended residential school. I wanted to share the importance of, in reality, of where we're at. I am the 1st generation to have not had my children taken away from me and forced to attend the residential school era. Let me repeat that just one more time. My sisters and I are the 1st generation to not have our children taken away from us and forced to attend residential school era. This website offers a wealth of knowledge. Please take the time to offer Phyllis's work. Thank you. I really love these words. Kalmotsat. We believe in providing quality health and wellness care within our primary care network regions. I request for you to take the time and check out the interactive map and see where the nearest residential school is to you, and that's part of taking action. I am in awe of all the rich, incredible resources, Indigenous, that are out there. I also request for you to review the CBC web link Beyond 94, that updates where we are and where we're moving forward, ensuring the 94 calls to actions are integrated. Check out the web link. I often get asked, how do I know so much resources? It has become a continued passion to be current and to find out what's out there. I'll never admit to my executive director, Daphne, on how much time I have accumulated doing research. I hope that this cultural safety and humility framework will also follow your heart today. We may be familiar with the 7 sacred teachings, the 7 grandfather teachings. There are important and valuable words here to identify the foundation of what cultural safety and humility means. Kalmotsat, we as Indigenous believe wholeheartedly that decisions today impact our next 7 generations. These valuable and lifelong teachings are connected to health and wellness. The 7 caring teachings identifies who we are, where we came from, and where we are going. It is a core foundation of our Indigenous identity to assist with the continued work of foundation and formal and informal training. This leads into the TRC, the calls to action, items 18 through 24. Number 18, Indigenous health and wellness. Acknowledge the state of Aboriginal health in Canada. Recognize health and Indigenous rights. Number 19, We often look for a quick fix to what is measurable goals. How do you measure heart work? Heart work is connecting with Indigenous communities, health reps. We know who all those are. It is those who work tirelessly and committed 12 hours a day, maybe longer, probably longer, to support elders and youth and children, to ensure everyone is taken care of. You want the answers? Connect with these fearless leaders and also acknowledge them. No, honor them for their hard work. Number 20, it talks a little bit about the off-reserve Indigenous. And I think about, we want to ensure that, and also acknowledge that these wonderful people belong to our communities too. Be accountable to the off-reserve. Offer that voice of what can work, of not what can work, but what will work. Build collaborative networking working groups supporting, such as in our communities, we have the Chilliwack Healthier Communities, the Opening Doors, the Indigenous Welcome Center. We will provide that voice for Indigenous off-reserve. Keep the work going. This next slide talks about or shares some beautiful work that's integrated with the Chilliwack Division of Family Practice. The top left corner identifies one of the calls to actions is the sacred space room in our new primary care health center. The importance of this work is bringing that balance and humility and strength when people need to access that, when they need to come and have some place of solace, a place to be recognized and offer that guidance that is needed for them for that day. So they don't carry on these heavy truths that are in existence. When you enter the wall and enter the room, on the side wall, there will be a map of the three-dimensional map of the 22 communities from Chilliwack to Boothroyd. Throughout this room will be some artifacts and drums to be able to have that honorable work, the honorable work that's needed to carry on with how we do the work that we're doing. We have the smudging available. We have traditional medicines that will be able to be offered not only as a teaching, but be able to be offered as supports within our communities. They'll be able to access that. I also wanted to acknowledge some of the wonderful pictures of Fred Meyerink, who will be displaying some of these throughout our new primary care health center. The bottom left, we have Francis Horne Sr. or Jr. Carving. We have Sebastian Abbott with his powwow regalia, Lilani Diablo with her wonderful tribute to the residential school era. And we have Keith Point sharing some of his carving, creating the canoes. It's really important to do this work. It's really important to identify who our special gifted people are within our communities. And I believe it's not so much putting people on a pedestal, but it's about acknowledging their hard work and acknowledging the importance and strengths and awareness and contributions of respectfulness to who we are as Indigenous. Continue on with the number 21 and 22. I shared a little bit about some of the pictures, recognizing the use of traditional healing and elders. I'm honored to provide what is cultural considerations for the new Primary Care Health Network Center. Mami Iethel out is helping one another. I think about number 24, and it's about having to continue on with the foundation, cultural safety and humility the formal and informal training. It's a lot of hard work. It's a dedication. It's moving forward. It's connecting with anybody and everybody who wants to play a part in creating that culturally safe space. Stay tuned for this exciting work to appear in the future. The United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People is probably one of the most important documents that exists. I believe it sums up quite nicely in the next slide. We have cultural connections, plus the 7 caring teachings that was identified in the Cultural Safety and Humility Framework. Created this poster and I thought, what would be the best title? And it's really easy. It's celebrating who we are. So the UNDRIP, the connection of these two equals Indigenous survival, dignity, and well-being. At this time, we're going to share some Indigenous perspectives of the TRC, and I'll hand it over to Lisa.
Thank you so much, Gracie, for that presentation. So my name is Lisa and I'm a research analyst at Reichert & Associates. So I'm going to be facilitating the discussion for us today. I just wanted to note, I have heard that we are having issues with people joining the call today. So I am having a staff member kind of look into that. It seems like there's a participation limit. So very sorry about that. We're trying to get that fixed as we kind of go through the next part of the discussion. And I also just want to kind of make it clear that, you know, we understand that what Gracie has presented and some of the things that we're going to be talking about today, it might be difficult or potentially triggering for many of us on the call today. So I do want to let you know that I will be sharing some helplines and support resources before we sign off today, just in case you feel like you want to speak to someone or just have that support. And I'll also be sharing the links at the end of the call around that, speaking to some of the resources that Gracie has mentioned in her presentation. So as Gracie noted, so this part of the presentation, Gracie and Francis have kind of invited us to hear their own perspectives on kind of what the TRC means to them and their vision for reconciliation. So we have 5 questions that we're going to be kind of reflecting on. And then, yeah, if you have questions as we are kind of listening to this or from Gracie's slides, please feel free to kind of ask those questions in the chat. And then once we're done with this part of the discussion, we'll open it up to everyone where we can have kind of a live question and answer period with Gracie and Francis. So just for now, just post any questions that you have in the chat box and we'll get to them later on this morning. So Gracie and Francis, are you both ready to start with the questions?
Yep.
Yes, okay, great. Okay, so our first question is just trying to get some understanding about when you first learned about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and those calls to action. So just kind of when you first learned about it and those initial reactions. So maybe starting with yourself, Francis.
Good morning. My name is Khut Whee Mul Uhk. I come in peace. You know, Truth and Reconciliation was it was something that we paid attention to, but didn't really absorb what was really going on, because, you know, a lot of us had grown up with the traumas of the past. We didn't think much of it because it was all normal. And Truth and Reconciliation now, for me, reflecting on everything that's happening and how these young children have spoken from beyond the grave and got the world's attention, not just a nation or a community, but the whole world's attention. And it's time that it got dealt with in a really good way, and it's time that people realize that this is about healing. This is about forgiveness. We can't go around and hold grudges. Grudges make us ill. We need to take care of each other. And the only way we can do that, we can't help each other if we're not healed. We need to learn to heal. And that's the most important part of Truth and Reconciliation.
Great. Thank you, Gracie. Francis, sorry, Gracie, what about yourself?
I assisted with the work as a cultural programs coordinator with Seabird Health under the direction of Carolyn Neufeld, health director. We supported a program that supported survivors and intergenerational survivors by reestablishing cultural teachings and traditions. So we've had the really good foundation of having that build up to where we are today. So I see the TRC as providing guidance on how to care for our future generations so this doesn't happen again.
And I guess another kind of sub question of this would just be, you've kind of already touched on it before, but why is something like the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, why is this work important?
Well, it's very important for the fact that it's brought attention to tragedies that have taken place in the past, and it's important that people, the whole world knows, that there still is human suffering going on today from all of this, and like Gracie said, intergenerational. Well, intergenerational trauma, it affects all of us still today, because there's, each and every time we hear about this in the news, it brings back memories of our loved ones that are gone, our loved ones that are still suffering. And so it's time that this got global recognition so that we could all learn to work together, everybody.
And yourself, Gracie?
It's working with and being accountable to those elders' voices who shared their words. It's reflecting back on how could we pay tribute to these elders who shared their stories, and we have to continue on with their work. We have to continue on with the teachings and do it all in a good way and not take it into a different perspective. We have to do it the way that the elders would like us to do it.
Okay. And then thinking about, so the health related calls to action, so the calls that you shared with us today, Gracie, can you tell me a bit about your initial reaction, when you saw those health related calls, particularly with the work that you're involved in? What was your initial reaction to those health related calls and their meaning?
I was very humbled, very excited. Healing centers is what we need. Our communities know how to take care of our community members. Connection to the traditional wellness mentors to support communities is a really good answer, is a really great strength. It's a really great opportunity. And focusing on Indigenous rights, separating the areas to address is so important. Today, we're only talking about the health, but there needs to be other discussions for the other areas too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What about you, Francis, when you see those, first kind of saw those health related calls to action and those, what was called in those areas, what was your initial reaction or takeaway from it?
Well, we're all in. And to cover all these and to recognize that there's been a lack of everything. Why? Because it's only become recognized recently, the traumas that we've faced as Indigenous people. And so instead of overlooking everything, we look at every aspect of it. I work for Fraser Health, by the way. I'm the ICA, Indigenous Cultural Advisor. So I deal with a lot of trauma in the hospitals all the time. And the only way that I found to deal with people and steer them in the direction that they need to go is to do prayer with them, to teach them to take their spirit back and love themselves again, which was so drastically taken away from us, beaten out of us, a lot of us. And so it's important that we do have these calls to action.
And I guess, so speaking, if there's one thing you wanted maybe a non-Indigenous person, so someone like myself, to understand or take away from these calls, from the health-related calls, what would be kind of that one thing you would really want me to understand?
The fact that there is human suffering going on, that this has been going on for a long, long time. I remember I grew up in Duncan, BC at the time in the early 70s, and it was recognized as the suicide capital of Canada. And I didn't know what was going on. I had no idea until years later, reflecting back, and I realized it all had to do with residential school. So the people that you see, the people that you meet and recognize as being down and out, in our culture, they've lost their spirit. In other words, they need to be loved and brought back to a place where they recognize that they are cared for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Gracie, for you, what would be kind of that one takeaway you would want, someone, a non-Indigenous person like myself, to walk away from this and be able to learn or understand better?
I have three. I'm a firm believer of the word accountability. As a previous council member for Soowahlie, I've learned what that means. And in order to be successful, you need to do what work is needed and learn what accountability means to yourself, your organization, the people you work for. Another thought that came to mind is Canadian history is what I believe is what we now call living trauma. Call it what it is, which is Canadians' history of cultural genocide. We just can't keep going over the top and not calling what it is. It's the truth.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay. And so moving forward to, what's happened since, that release of the commission, the TRC report and those calls to action, has anything positive, has there been any positive impacts from having this report and these calls to action? Like what stands out to you, or some things or changes or impacts that you've seen over the past few years since that report and the calls were released?
Well, I've been with Fraser Health. I'm in my 5th year now, and I do recognize and through all the health authorities that they've taken action in so many ways, in recognizing that a lot of the Indigenous people are hurting in so many different ways, and most of all, it's a lack of trust, and they're doing what they can to build that trust by hiring people such as myself. And this is going on in pretty well all the health authorities. They are reaching out and placing people, Indigenous Cultural Advisors or what have you, having them in place to comfort and to help people out and let them know that there is help there for them.
Mm-hmm. And Gracie, what are some of the impacts or changes that you may have noticed since kind of the official release of that report and the calls?
I think it's having the opportunity to share in webinars like this, providing the healthy risk to be here today, offering a cultural sharing series at the division, showcasing local Indigenous communities, facilitating discussions on topics of impacts of colonization, and also the connection with Reichardt's. That's just some of the examples for myself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the next question would just be, what are some of maybe unintended impacts or changes that you've noticed since these calls, or things that, maybe you were surprised by that have emerged kind of over the past few years? Is there anything that comes to mind for you, Francis?
Well, the unintended impacts are recognizing that there are different aspects of truth and reconciliation that people need to pay attention to, and that's the 60s scoop, the stolen children, the adopted children that never got their families back, and slowly everything is coming to recognition that people know that there's still problems, and there's still problems to be dealt with. Yeah, it's going to take a while to sort it all out, but it's happening. Believe it or not, for some people, it is happening.
Mm-hmm. And Gracie, for yourself, what are some other impacts or changes that you've kind of noticed or witnessed, and that maybe were unintended or surprising to you?
I really appreciate all the wonderful artwork that we've been seeing the Indigenous are sharing their gifts, the impacts of the residential school era. It's humbling and beautiful and real. This is real truth that has happened, where artists are capturing this. We need to not stop looking at it because it hurts, because it makes us feel sad. That's not the intention of the work. It's to connect the real truth. I am grateful.
Mm-hmm. 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 And Francis, I remember from one of the conversations we've had earlier about kind of the impact of media and how media has come into play with how with what's emerged around the residential schools more recently, and that impact. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, the media plays a very important role, but sometimes things can be overplayed or downplayed. And the one thing I recognized, were triggers that were happening for myself and various other people that I know. And it has to do with unresolved childhood anger and trauma, where we go, what is wrong with me? What's going on? I keep getting these triggers, these flashbacks. Well, I don't watch the news. That's one thing I stay away from it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to realize that, each and every time that our own people, our Indigenous people are watching these, the anger comes up, the resentment, everything. And they wonder, what's wrong with me? Well, the reality is it can be very debilitating through the media sometimes, what the goings on. What we need to hear is how people are healing from all this, rather than keep playing the same old record over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for you, Gracie, do you have any thoughts on that, around kind of the role of media, or how maybe that has been impacting, yourself or your community as well?
In one sense, I see how it has highlighted the great Indigenous resources, the books, the podcasts, the songs that are coming out. It's really important. And I also think the impact on young adults and youth, and how it's raising more awareness. And that's what needs to happen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And yeah, so I guess that brings me to one of our last questions here. I'll just get it up on the slide. But yeah, I'm wondering if we can take some time to hear about your kind of vision for reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. And I think that's something for many of us here today, it's thinking about, the calls to action and what are kind of our own calls to action in our own life and our own work that we do, and in our relationships, and just wondering, yeah, so firstly, kind of what is your vision for reconciliation? What does that look like? And then any actions you think that that people can be taking. And I just want to note that it looks like we have resolved our issue with people joining, so we do have unlimited capacity, so people can now join if they had been locked out previously. So I apologize that the presentation wasn't seen by everyone, but we would still welcome anyone. If you have colleagues or anyone that has been having trouble joining, you can actually rejoin now and you will be admitted. So there's still an opportunity to really benefit from this conversation that we're hearing with Gracie and Francis. So yeah, so sorry, going back to that question, kind of your vision for reconciliation, and then actions that people can be taking. I wonder if you can speak to that for us, Francis.
Yeah, the one thing that I recognize is this has gotten the attention of people of all races. And the most important part of this is, for me, is steering people in the direction of healing and showing people that healing can happen. We don't want people to hold a grudge. I don't want anybody to hold a grudge on my behalf. I want people to know that I've learned to heal from this, but most of all, learn to forgive. And I've had people say, well, how can you ever forgive? I've been through a lot of trauma in my life. But you know what? The most important thing in my life, and the secret to life, is love and forgiveness. And this is what I teach about everywhere I go. And I've been through horrendous things, and people go, how did you ever live through that? And you know what? I carried on because I was taken care of by the Spirit. And for our people, Spirit is only love. We need to learn to love each other. It doesn't matter who they are. And looking and listening to the people, the non-Indigenous people of all different races, they're concerned, but they also want to help. And the most important part I heard one elder say is, how can we help? And the elder said, it's not help I'm looking for. I want people to listen.
Thank you, Francis. Gracie, how about for yourself?
I wanted to share how it's not a checkbox to say that you're here today. Continue on with the next 364 days. Continue on with the day of reflection, discussions. Make those discussions at your organization and even with your families. Share, what does white privilege mean? Share Indigenous worldviews such as the 7 caring teachings models. Continue to identify the Indigenous languages and integrate these teachings through traditional territory acknowledgement, email signatures, sharing of traditional territories within your work. We owe it to our ancestors who have created this safe and cultural space for us to enjoy and live and work in. Continue to read Indigenous articles, books, podcasts, children's books. Enjoy the Talking Stick Festival and other theater organizations who promote Indigenous artists. They all share Indigenous teachings that build up to what is our Indigenous identity.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you both for sharing so much. I just want to see if you have kind of any last thoughts on what you wanted to share, or any takeaways that you wanted to leave folks with today. If there's anything that we haven't talked about, or maybe a question I didn't ask that you would like to speak to, please feel free. I don't know, Francis, for you, if there's anything else that you wanted to share with us.
Sure. You know, I look back on, as I reflect and I go through a lot of things, I deal with people every day. And for me to be able to deal with people, I have to cleanse myself all the time. And it's important. I learned, you know, at a younger age that I was 51 years old. I was an alcoholic, and I turned to my culture. I was told by an elder to go into the mountains and find a waterfall and you'll find your power. I had no idea what that meant. I went there and it meant taking your spirit back. In other words, it meant loving yourself, forgiving yourself, forgive everybody and anybody, no matter what. And some of the things that I've been through in my life, I forgave everybody. Therefore, when I work with people and they go, how did you ever do it? And it was just love and forgiveness. Most of all, loving myself, love, honoring and respecting each and every human being on this planet, and realizing that we all need to reach out and help each other. My grandfather used to say, the only time we're allowed to look down on somebody is when we're putting our hand out to help them back up. And that's a quote that I live by today.
That's wonderful. Gracie, for yourself, any kind of last thoughts or things that you would want to share with this group, or for people to kind of think about as they kind of move forward with their day as well?
I'm just really grateful to be in the work that I am, to have been raised by my wonderful parents and grandparents, to create that opportunity to learn each day and to build up each day and learn from each other. I think it's just really important. We have on the next slide about how do we provide support to residential school error survivors and intergenerational survivors and communities. And I first started this sentence with let us. So now I'll change that instead and say we will. So we will continue to raise our children, our grandchildren, which I call grand gifts. I also have a great grand gift. Elders who are traditional wellness mentors, we will encourage and integrate and continue on learning our Indigenous languages to continue to share sovereignty, to exercise. We will continue to celebrate dances, celebrate by lines to honor Indigenous who we are. Also, continuing on with honoring the water in our environment that needs to be protected. The lands around us need our love and attention. I don't think we need as much dollar stores that we have. but we need to take care of our lands and make sure that they're providing what's needed to keep us continuing to be in this safe space. We need our gardens to grow traditional plants and cultivate and medicines to create from our forest, not a pharmacy. I ask that you have not spent as much time in First Nations communities to take on that opportunity. Be able to have that time to also listen to the stories. I think about how when we listen to the stories to have really good words about it and thoughts and not have judgments or negative judgments. Racism is taught. Please be mindful of your words, of your thoughts. I think that's really important. Be mindful of your opinions and how you came to your conclusions of our First Nations people. In our Helcamalam words, we will still keep on going. Kwelme set telt meal.
Thank you so much, Gracie. All right. So I do see that some people who weren't able to join previously are able to join now as well. So I just want to say again, I really apologize for that issue that we had, and I'm glad that you're still able to join. So just to summarize, Gracie gave a presentation going over the TRC health-related calls to action, and then we had a discussion with Francis and Gracie around their perspectives on the TRC and those health-related calls. And so now we wanted to open it up for questions from anyone joining us here today. And I also wanted to welcome you to share what you are doing today, or what you have been doing to support residential school era survivors, intergenerational survivors, communities and families. So we'd be happy to hear what other kind of actions people are taking as well. I know for myself and for our team here at Reichert and Associates, so of course, we're really honored to be able to support Gracie and Francis to kind of expand their reach to the networks that we have access to, and to be able to share their stories and vision for reconciliation. So we're really honored to be able to do that. And then after the webinar today for us, so that's our team is actually taking a time this afternoon to share a meal and a discussion to just reflect on today and develop a list of kind of calls to action in our own work for the next year, and actions that we can take to kind of move towards reconciliation in our own work as well. So that's kind of just a story from our end, what we have kind of committed to do as a team. So feel free to kind of share any actions like that, or what you're doing to honor today as well. We'd be happy to hear that. So for asking questions, you can ask questions in the chat box as well, or you can use the reaction button to raise and lower your hand. And so I'll move from questions from the chat as well as the raise hand as well. And we also, if we don't get to every question today, we will be circulating a short feedback survey after the webinar. So that's where you can kind of add any questions that maybe you weren't able to ask, or we didn't have time for, or you didn't feel comfortable asking. And then we'll also be sharing the recording of this webinar and posting kind of the resources that'll be on our website, and we'll also email it out to anyone that was registered for the meeting today. So yeah, so I guess just to see, Gracie and Francis, are you ready to receive some questions from the audience?
Yep, sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, feel free to use that reaction button to raise your hand, and I'm just going to look through the chat to see if there's any questions as of yet. Yeah, so any questions related to what the content that Gracie presented, or about kind of the perspectives that they were able to share. I see a lot of appreciation for what you have shared, Gracie and Francis, and also others just kind of noting that it is a very emotional day for them. So again, I will be posting some support resources at the end of the webinar as well for anyone that does want to speak to someone. I'm just looking through the chat here. And just, yeah, giving people a moment to to think about and reflect on their own as well. But feel free to kind of raise your hand or ask questions. All right, we see I have a first question here from Julie about how were the TRC health recommendations addressed in the Chilliwack PCN planning? So the PCN being the primary care network in Chilliwack.
Creating that opportunity for my position as an Indigenous Relations Manager to begin with the cultural safety and humility framework is really important to create that Indigenous voice and build up with what we have is already the connections of the communities. So it's really important to have the positive community engagement and have the really good questions of what does cultural safety and humility mean to you, and share and have that communication strategy to the communities to identify work is consistent, it's moving forward, and it's taking care of the primary care and also the supports that's needed, so we don't have those fears of coming to the hospital or those fears of connecting with counselors. So it's all in about building up from where we are and taking on those opportunities in a good way. Yeah.
Thank you, Gracie. Another question here from Patty of, when you spoke about spending time with Indigenous communities, what is the best way to go about that? So spending time with or engaging with Indigenous communities, what are some strategies or recommendations around that? And open that up to you, Francis, as well, in terms of your perspective on that question too.
Well, a lot of people are reaching out, you know, health professionals and that, you know, psychologists and doctors like that are in the band offices, and they're asking the same question. And the best thing to do, get out and talk to people, get out and get to know people. In my job that I've been doing, like I said, in my 5th year, I know everybody around, and just through the longhouse and things like that, or longhouses, we get to know everybody. And as time goes by, you build a reputation. If you want to help people and help them in a really good way, just get to be kind, be honorable, be respectful. And that's one of the best ways to do it. Or whether it's at at different meetings, whatever, or getting out and just shaking somebody's hand. Well, you can't shake hands nowadays, so you can, give them an elbow or a fist punch there. But communication is the key. That's how you're gonna. And don't be afraid. I mean, it's something we need to lose the fear and learn to be honorable and respectful of each other.
Gracie, anything that you wanted to add on that?
We're grateful that people have the interest in connecting with our communities to be able to offer support. So do it in a good way, do offering tobacco offering, or just to honor the work and to acknowledge the people who have built up their teachings and are willing to share. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we have a great anonymous question as well about how can we discuss truth and trauma in the workplace sensitively, knowing that it can be triggering, especially, if staff members are also Indigenous.
Yes. Oh, I guess we're not meeting.
Oh. Yes, sorry, Gracie.
I guess so. Yeah.
So building up on the formal and informal training, the cultural safety and humility work, ensuring that has that Indigenous voice, because we know what will work, and also keeping it consistent and ensuring that the materials get kind of updated and that it's trained throughout the organization, not just a handful of people, everybody. It's really important to make that connection with everybody. Yeah.
Okay, and Francis, for you, any thoughts on, so I guess that same question that was asked about, you know, just discussing truth and trauma in the workplace sensitively, like you've already mentioned, you know, it's good, we need to be talking about this and to be able to do that. But yeah, just do you have any other kind of tips or strategies that you would recommend?
Well, the thing about, like I said, communication is key to all this. And people, when I talk to people, it's in strict confidence. It's all about confidentiality. But to get them to come out of it knowing that, you know, they're not asking ridiculous questions. And, you know, for myself, pretty well anything goes. And people aren't afraid to come and ask me questions. And I deal with it all the time in ER and on the different wards and ICU, things like that. And the most important part is that they just want to know how they can reach out and help. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, also have a question from Leanna, wondering if libraries, museums would be open on the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation to reflect more on the culture for sharing and participating. So I don't know if Gracie or Francis, if that's something you would be able to speak to, or maybe that's, yeah, if you're aware of that or not.
No, I'm not aware, sorry.
I'm not aware neither.
No, okay, that's fine. All right, if anyone else in the audience does know about kind of libraries and museums being open, if you are able to post that in the chat, or if someone wants to raise their hand and answer that as well, that'd be great to hear from anyone that does able to answer that question, but we can also look into it as well and get back to you, Leanna. Another question here. So this one from Marla saying, I work with young children. What is the best way to start a discussion with young children about truth and reconciliation? And I'm sure this is a question that many others, you know, with young children or even kind of teenage children as well, when to start these discussions and how to have those discussions. If you have any thoughts on that, maybe starting with yourself, Gracie.
I do remember seeing some posts. I would check with First Nations Education Steering Committee, Indian Residential School Society. UBC has some really great resource on the residential school. There is another site that I've seen that I'll check into as well. CBC also has some really great information. So there's a wealth of knowledge out there, and storybooks, I believe, are also an opportunity to share. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Francis, what about you in terms of having these discussions with young children? When is kind of the best way to start having those discussions, or time to have those discussions with children?
Well, I have a 5-year-old granddaughter, and they're being taught things in school. And there are books out now by people like Native Northwest that teach about different things, and it's important to have these discussions. As children, we didn't have any kind of discussion because our parents, or my mother, she was a residential school survivor. It didn't get talked about. If we asked questions, she went like that, put her finger up to her lip and just told us to be quiet. You know, our friends would disappear, our cousins would disappear at the end of summer, and we didn't know what was going on. They'd gone to residential school. So it's important that our children are kept informed that what's going on is and the tragedies that happen, but talk about it in a way that a child understands, where we don't particularly share the horror stories, but these things did happen.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, and I see another, just a comment from Christine, just being grateful for the for the forgiveness being extended to us from yourself, Gracie and Francis, and for letting us kind of hear your stories and perspectives on what you shared today. And I see a note here from Terry O'Brien that the BC Provincial Museum in Victoria is open today. So that's just kind of an answer from the audience to another question we had from Leanna earlier. I'm just looking through here. And then Renee is asking about the many different websites and suggestions that we referred to today. So I will be sharing those resources on a slide at the end of the presentation. I will be sharing them in the chat, and then we will be posting on our website all those resources and the recording from today's webinar as well. Okay. Any other questions for Gracie or Francis?
Wanted to offer this opportunity as we're waiting to hear from questions. Is there any comments from the division of family practice in Chilliwack or Fraser Health who wanted to share any thoughts today? We may have Daphne on the call, or Dr. Josh Gregan, or anybody else from the division. You're welcome to.
I can speak, Gracie. I'm just yeah, I just really appreciate the work that you and Francis have put into this presentation. It's not just information, but it's actually information from the heart, and it's quite moving to hear. I think of your statement that you were the first generation not having children taken away. And that just gives me goosebumps to realize how recent this is. And like you say, it's ongoing living trauma. So it's not something that we can think of as history. And also, Francis, what you said about these kids have spoken from the grave. Again, it's just truth, but it's also very emotional to think about the reality behind that truth being, yeah, just so much suffering leading up to this point. But I sure appreciate your perspective and the courage it takes to say, don't hold a grudge. And it's about love and forgiveness. That's just an amazing message to hear. And as non-Indigenous, I'm very grateful that you can say that, and you're speaking it from the heart as something that you're extending to all of us who are non-Indigenous. So we thank you for that.
Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you very much, Gracie and Francis, for that too, because I looked at that interactive map that people can go to, and I just took a quick glance of where I grew up and where and what was going on at that time, and I found that within 100 kilometers of where I was going to, like a local neighborhood school in Regina, Saskatchewan, I was surrounded by 5 residential schools, and within 100 kilometers, and 3 of them were in operation. 3 of them had kids in them at that time. I had no idea.
Yeah, I think that was a great resource that Gracie was able to find as well. Sorry, I see that. Believe it's Josh. You have your hand raised. I think your screen name's a little bit different today, but I believe that's.
I don't know who Emma Shepherd is, but it's Josh Craig, and I'm privileged to work alongside Gracie. And I think the reflection is that this is truth, that what Gracie and Francis have shared is absolute truth that affects every patient, and therefore every meeting, and therefore every community, therefore every situation that we are involved with. And I look through the screen and see many of our healthcare leaders and our division members. And so I would just continue to encourage us all, and I'll project my own, is just sit and listen to Francis and listen to Gracie and listen to the stories and let them speak to your heart, not just to your ears. Because as I've been privileged to work in some of our communities over the years, that this just has such a profound effect, and the wisdom and the insight and the forgiveness, as Daphne referenced to, is something that I don't think we have extended that same direction generally. And the fact that Gracie and Francis and the community have the wisdom, the insight, and the heart to do that for us collectively is something that should be reciprocated, should be shared and replicated over and over and over again. So just a heart of gratitude to Francis and Gracie and the entirety of the group.
Thank you, Josh. Okay.
I also wanted to identify that there was also Indian day schools that were connected in our communities that were more local. So keep in mind that that also existed. because it's also a connection with the residential school era.
Okay. I have another anonymous question here from someone who is a healthcare provider and does come across generational issues where the elders also incorporate Christianity into their personal healing, but the younger generation are maybe less receptive to that. So this question is just about balancing being client-centered and culture-centered in our approach to healing. So I think that kind of speaks to, well, a few things here, kind of a legacy of colonialism and religion as well, but how to balance kind of, you know, the culture and also what the client may or may not, the client or patient may or may not, you know, be receptive to.
I think of the holistic teachings, create what it is that creates that balance in your life. You know, so with Indigenous, it's about getting out in Mother Nature and Solh Temexw, and it's just so important to find whatever that is that gives you that balance. And yes, we do have many different teachings or reviews or maybe expectations, but it's all about finding that one that works for us and connecting and sharing with that and developing it, right? Developing it to the way we want. So we could heal, so we could move forward, so we could be grateful every day for all the work that we do. When we walk in through doors, I kind of see an imaginary basket on top of each door. And as you walk through the door, any negative energy goes in that basket and you carry on with your day. You carry on with the work that you need to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great tactic, and yeah, kind of visual to have as well. Francis, anything you wanted to share about that in terms of maybe that balance?
Yeah, you know, in our culture, there are elders that left teachings with us specifically about that. And one of the things, this is Salachitl from Yakuquius in Chilliwack, the late Salachitl, that he would get up and speak to us in the longhouse and tell us, you know, that we're to respect all religions. He said, regardless of what we think, he said, it all means the same. It's all about love and forgiveness. We're not to criticize each other. I had a priest phone me when all this stuff broke out about the 215, and he was very, very worried. I said, you know what? There's a select few that have committed crimes from your religion. That doesn't mean that we're going to hold a grudge against anybody, against any particular religion. We need to respect each other. We need to respect each other's belief systems. And, you know, when I talk about love and forgiveness, it's so valuable and so important in the work that I do. And when I speak, I tell people, you know, that if you teach a dying man or woman love and forgiveness, they'll pass in peace. Or if you teach a healing man or woman, like in AA or whatever they want to heal from, if you teach them love and forgiveness, they'll begin to heal, because it's all about letting go of that past. It's always the past that holds us down. And so, and like I say, I choose not to hold grudges. I choose to love, honor, and respect everybody.
Thank you, Francis. I wonder, Gracie, also this question kind of made me think about that, the two-eyed seeing kind of model. I think you maybe touched on it briefly in the presentation, but I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about your perspective on that model or that approach.
My perspective is looking at it from two different views, two different lenses, and in the center having that ethical space. Such great words, hey? Ethical space. And coming to that common understanding. It's really so amazing to see, you know, how sometimes terms or words get created for new meanings. And sometimes it does get a little bit frustrating to kind of go, oh, well, that just means this, right? So when I see the two-eyed seeing, it's about creating that ethical space, that connection, and also offers the collaboration that needs to exist, not can exist, that needs to exist. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I have another anonymous question here. This participant just explaining that their family adopted children during the 60s scoop. So the question is, how do I approach speaking with my own children about this, about the fact that their uncles whom they adore were essentially taken from their birth family and are part of kind of their family now, and it being so harmful. So I guess again, similarly, explaining something like the 60 scoop to children that may have been impacted by it.
The 60 scoop, at the time when I was scooped in 1964, I didn't know what was going on. We were not debriefed. We were not talked to. We simply were scooped. Literally, we were coming home from the river. It was a hot summer day, blue sky, skipping down the road, and I can still hear my sister, my late sister, and my brother, laughing, and we're skipping down the road. We get home, and my grandmother says, and she was crying on the steps, pointing to a car. She said, "You have to go with that lady."
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't know what that all meant. And so I was brought first. I was brought into this home. It's a tiny little box, with my belongings, which amounted to nothing, and told, this is where you have to live. And we're not talked to about anything, absolutely nothing. So as time went on and I became an adult in that, I ended up with a lot of problems knowing and wondering, who am I? Where do I belong? What is going on? I've lost my identity. And that's the whole thing about this, is losing your identity and then wanting to get it back and not knowing where you belong. I came from a family of 14 kids, and I don't have any closeness with my family. So to be able to reach out and talk to your own children about it, and it's let them know your true feelings, what you're really feeling, and how you feel about all this, and how you feel about, these poor children that were taken away and just literally put in the middle of nowhere and going, this is where you live. And I had to grow up with that, but I grew up in a good way where I didn't ever get into trouble. And I was always told that I'd end up in jail. I never ever ended up in jail. I had a good moral compass all of my life. So, I mean, it's something that communication is the key. If you want to talk to somebody, it reminds me of a teaching. If you speak your mind, you're always going to hurt somebody. If you speak from your heart, you can't go wrong.
That's well put. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Francis. Another question here from Katie about what are some open-ended questions to ask others that can be helpful to aid them in the process of healing. And I wonder also, I mean, Gracie, I'm sure you have an answer for this as well, but Francis, in your work with the Fraser Health Authority, I'm wondering if that's probably something that you encounter quite a bit. If you have any thoughts on what kind of questions that have been helpful in healing for others.
Well, a lot of people, I get all kinds of questions. I deal with all kinds of people day in and day out. And a lot of the questions, believe it or not, is where can I get sage? Where can I get things? Where can I do a prayer? And the prayer is simple. You can do that anywhere. And, to work with people, I take people on healing journeys up into the mountains. I take them on a long trek up to a waterfall and teach them how to let go of the past, how to let go of the unresolved childhood anger and trauma. And once that's all said and done, and people come to the realization that they can be freed of that simply because they ask questions, how can I heal? And so I offer that to them. And I worked in recovery for 4 years with Vision Quest, and I taught guys that were out on bail, and the results were phenomenal because it was teaching people to take their own spirit back. In other words, to love themselves and to honor this body as a temple for the spirit, and most of all, forgive.
What about for you, Gracie? Any questions that you find helpful in terms of helping others in their process of healing?
Having that culturally safe space to be able to work through and support and build up on creating that balance of healing. A lot of the work we do is because it's hard work, it's better to do in person and not have a document in front of you, a checklist.
Yeah.
And creating that comfortable space of questions and answers, maybe not so much the answers are important and recording them down and taking notes, but it's just being there for that person, taking care of their daily needs. You may not know where that Indigenous person just came from. Francis and I could definitely agree that on any given day, we may go to a grocery store or a clothing store and be followed. We don't know, you may not know on how many times we were made comments to or judged by body language or eye movement. So it's all about being supportive for that person and not having any judgment at all. That's the start, right? It's creating that respectful engagement at all times. It's so important. It's so important. Connecting with the advisors, the cultural advisors, and the advocates that are connected with the primary care. They are so supportive. They have a wealth of knowledge. Connecting with them and saying, we would like to go about this and do this. Can we check it over with you? That's the way to do it, right? Yeah.
Great, thank you both for sharing. It's so appreciated. And I can just see through the comments that mean so much appreciation for what you're sharing and the truths that you're kind of bringing to light and sharing with us this morning. Any other questions? Feel free again to use that reaction button to raise your hand or continue to use that chat box as well to post any questions that you have. Yeah, we do have a few more minutes for questions before we move on to kind of sharing those resources and the helpline information as well at the end of the call before we log off today. And also welcome to hear what else you're doing today to honor this day or kind of actions that you're taking in the year ahead. That would also be really helpful for others to hear, maybe that don't have a specific idea of where to get started, hearing from others and what others are doing, and even as the suggestions that Gracie and Francis have already shared, it'd be great to hear from everyone around that as well.
Today we touched on just the health calls to actions, even though some of us may just be connected in health services, but read the TRC and read the rest of the document, read the UNDRIP, review the in plain sight, build up on all of that really great work that has been published to create a culturally safe space. And connect with other people and learn about what their thoughts are and build up on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I see someone also mentioning they're taking the time today to read the book, 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act, which I know in the last webinar that you did, Gracie, you did go through those 21 facts, and that is also an excellent resource that I know you've recommended before as well. And I think I saw earlier in the chat also a march that was taking place in Stalo at 4 p.m. So I think that's something that people are also doing as well.
Not today. They had to cancel with COVID restrictions. There was going to be a couple of walks. But they're not happening today.
Okay. Yeah, I see Renee there in the chat just mentioning that same thing, that it was canceled due to restrictions. So Renee just saying that they're visiting the orange lights at the Better Road roundabout. So yeah, just wondering if there's anything else in your region, Gracie, that you would recommend for anyone else today if they're also in that region.
I know UFE was doing some work, as well as there was some event with unveiling at Stalo as well. That was happening today too.
Okay. Yeah, thank you others for starting. I see Rachel saying continuing to learn by taking the Indigenous Canada course from the University of Alberta and then having a discussion with others around it. The release of the For Love movie, okay, with the Carrie-Sakani Nation on the impact of residential schools. Thanks Josh for sharing that as well. Okay, I do have another anonymous question here. Okay, this is a great question about, so if a non-Indigenous person witnesses discrimination, like as Gracie had mentioned, being followed in a store or dismissed in a hospital, how can a non-Indigenous person witnessing that, how can they help without being patronizing or not being helpful? What would you say to someone if you were a non-Indigenous person witnessing that?
I would say follow your heart, right? Follow your heart. If you feel that you just really need to stand up and share your thoughts and share your reaction. Of course, we want to be safe, but a lot of times when I get, the negative kind of judgments, it does play a toll on you after a while. Because it's a daily basis, right? So it's kind of learning to not carry that with us. But I do appreciate that a non-Indigenous would like to offer some respectfulness. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What about from your perspective, Francis?
Well, it's human by nature to judge. That's how we get anywhere in life. And the reality is, for a situation like that, is not to overreact. Say a little prayer and how to deal with it. I mean, prayer is very, very powerful. It's something that I 100% believe in. And those prayers get answered by letting the Spirit speak through you in a kind way. You don't have to overreact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. I did just want to go, I have had some questions around the resources that you spoke to today, Gracie. So I'm just going to take us to our next slide, but we still have some time for some questions. So these are some of the resources that Gracie went through in her presentation. So I'm wondering, Gracie, if you want to speak to any of these resources or add anything that maybe wasn't presented earlier.
I touched base on a couple of these. I really believe it's important to review some of the information and share it as part of your orientation, part of your foundation onboarding. With me, I have 5 slide decks that I prepare people for when they're coming on board. So find those resources that work for you. And also find the resources that connect within your territory so that you're aware as to what's available and who are the go-to and how important it is to identify even areas of like traditional maps that'll help with your traditional land acknowledgement. It's really important to start somewhere, and these are great resources. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So I see there. Yeah, any last questions for Gracie or Francis, or from either for Gracie, Francis, or Stephen as well, if there's any kind of last comments you wanted to make before we come to the end of our webinar today.
I just want to really thank Gracie and Francis for sharing today, and for everybody who is here listening as well.
Okay. So I also wanted to share some of those support resources and helplines that are available. So we've put together some options here that we think could be suitable for many people that are joining today. So I'll also post these in the chat just now. And as well, if you have any questions the end that you want to about the webinar themselves or questions for Gracie, please feel free to use my email address. You can contact me at lisa@reichardtassociates.ca. So that's any kind of webinar related questions. And again, we will be circulating the recording as well as the additional resources that were spoken about today, probably within the next few days, possibly early next week. And yeah, I just want to say thank you so much to Gracie and Francis for sharing their morning and part of this day with us today. I feel really honored to be able to support you and be able to hear this conversation that we had, and also to the Chilliwack Division and Fraser Health Authority for supporting this webinar as well. So yes, we would just wanted to leave you with one last kind of quote to think about, and then Gracie has also offered to drum for us as we end the session. And I just want to say thank you so much for everyone being together with us today and sharing this day with us. So I really appreciate it.
I'm just going to share 3 kind of quotes that are really important. This has been just such a great morning to be able to share this work in a good way. The first one is, if hurt people can hurt people, imagine what a healed people can do. My second is, watch your thoughts, for they become words. Watch your words, for they become actions. Watch your actions, for they become habits. Watch your habits, for they become your character. Watch your character, for it becomes your destiny. What we think is, we become. I hope your reconciliation journey has begun with today's presentation. Continue on with the vulnerability to build up and create a true understanding of where do I come from? Where am I going? Why am I here? And who am I? I ask that you remember to do the work from your heart, and you can do no wrong. Take with this what you will. I leave these final thoughts in your capable hands. I'll finish with the Women's Warrior song. Anybody who would like to join me, you're welcome. I'll do 4 verses, and the last one, I'll put my hands up. Hey, 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 yeah, he, oh, ho, yeah, he, oh, ho, hey, hey, yeah, he, oh, yeah, he, oh, ho, hey, hey, yeah, he, oh, hey, 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 yeah, he, oh, ho, yeah, he, oh, ho, hey, hey, yeah, he, oh, yeah, he, oh, ho, hey, hey, yeah, he, oh, hey, 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 yeah, he, oh, ho, yeah, he, oh, ho, hey, hey, yeah, he, oh, yeah, he, oh, ho, hey, hey, yeah, he, oh, hey, 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 yeah, he, oh, ho, yeah, he, oh, ho, hey, hey, yeah, he, oh, yeah, he, oh, ho, hey, hey, yeah, he, oh, hey, 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 yeah, he, oh, ho, yeah, he, oh, ho, hey, hey, yeah, he, oh, yeah, he, oh, ho, hey, hey, yeah, he, oh. Kosai, beautiful day. Thank you for today. A day of reflection. Continue on with the work. Kosai.
Thank you so much, Gracie. Thank you, Francis.
Yeah. Lisa, I'd just like to thank you for hosting this webinar, and Steve also. And thank you to Gracie for the beautiful song and the words that she brought forward, Aichka. And thank you to all the people that shared this webinar with each and every one of us.
Great. Thanks, everyone. All right, have a good day.
Yeah, take care.
A nice voice on there, doesn't it?